Hi, everyone, and welcome to Mystery Bel Canto. I'm your host, Joseph Cianciulli. I'm extremely excited to jump into today's lesson, today's podcast. This is brand new. I'm new to this. I'm so super excited to share my experiences in Bel Canto voice building with all the singers, the teachers, and the possible SLPs interested in incorporating music speech therapy into their work, their therapeutic and clinical work. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to start with a little bit of background about myself, my training. So I actually started with my degree work in concert piano and voice and opera. When I was 19, I went and sang for the Metropolitan Opera. I was singing a lot of high arias, a lot of big arias, probably too big for me at the time. I thought that I had the most impressive of voices, and I was just going to be welcomed into the Metropolitan Opera community at such a young age. And I was humbled to find that I was singing in a mixed voice. I had not been told this at the college level. I had not been told this in my private study. I had only been told this by this man named Dan Montes, who had spent 35 years documenting vocal lineages, traveling around from city to city, to state, and at times country to country, looking for true bel canto lineages. And he was the only one, when we were singing back at the Victor Cafe in Philadelphia, who would, cross his arms and look at me and say, "Oh, what a beautiful mixed voice you have." And it used to drive me crazy because I didn't know what mixed voice was. I thought he was saying that I was singing with falsetto and that it was very light, but in my head, it was a big voice. So it wasn't until I had sung for the Metropolitan Opera for the first time that they had really sent me back to Dan to have a serious discussion about the voice and about where I was at vocally. So what they had said to me specifically was, you need somebody who understands appoggiare and who can build appoggio in the voice. I had never heard of this. I'd been in school for a number of years at that point in college for voice and opera, and no one had used the word appoggio. I had no idea what that meant. So I sat down with Dan, and Dan basically said, when you finish your undergraduate degree, if you are really serious about your voice and you really want to follow this path, you're going to have to make some changes. At this time, I was about to debut a work with Opera Delaware. I was auditioning with Philadelphia Opera Company for some comprimario work and preparing for master's studies in voice. So I was working as a singer at the time, and I was very excited to be singing. And the first thing Dan said was, for the next 3 to 5-ish years, you're going to have to stop singing. You're going to have to come to see me for your lessons at least 2 times a week. That is a prerequisite because I'm not going to rebuild what I've already built. But this will be quite a journey for you if you decide to take this step. And I said, okay. It was not the easiest. I canceled all my engagements. I didn't pursue master's studies after my undergraduate. And Dan basically said, because I had another degree in concert piano and I had retired during my the second year of my undergrad, I had retired from dance so I could focus on my voice. He said, maybe you should focus on those things. Maybe you can get on the stage that way while you're building your voice. So I did. I spent some time as principal pianist at Pennsylvania Ballet. I danced professionally with the Louisville Ballet. I'd done some off-Broadway and some small little dance roles here and there and a lot of accompaniment. But all the while having my voice built twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week for multiple hour sessions with Dan. And it wasn't until year 5 or 6 that Dan had actually said, "Do you want to learn to build voices?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." He said, "I'm going to pass as much as I can on to you." And he did. I have pages and pages and pages of voice building information of how to use certain vowels and consonants to remedy certain vocal states. I have just historical information on the lineage, but that's kind of my story. So after I had finished my work with Dan after 10 years, he had passed a lot of information on to me. He had said, "You're ready to go out and sing," and COVID had happened. So he said, "You know what? let's just start learning roles. So we had prepared 8 roles using the Opera Practice Perfect recordings, and then me just hammering them out on the piano, and then working with diction coaches and language coaches at the time, all through Zoom. But when we had finished the whole COVID thing, I actually took a turn. I went back to school, completed my degree work in speech language pathology, and then went into alternative health because I think we all know as artists, you need money for this career. And I really wanted a stable, something stable for my family that could allow me to perform, to teach, to really pursue anything I wanted to do in my adult life. So that's my story. But I want to jump into today's lecture podcast, which is going to be about the lineages themselves, about the secrecy surrounding them, and really what is voice building versus voice teaching, because I know voice building, the term is a little new for a lot of us here. So let's get into it. The lineage that I come from is the Garcia lineage. It is a direct lineage in succession from Garcia all the way up through Lottie Lehman, John C. Wilcox, who Roz Evans actually worked directly with John C. Wilcox, who was known as the teacher of teachers. He was one of the founders of NATS. John C. Wilcox was trained by Italians, and I know there's actually a lot of people that follow David Jones, his information, which is actually a Wilcox lineage as well. I worked with Barbara Mathis, Dr. Barbara Mathis, and she had also shared that information with me as well, that information really is John C. Wilcox information. It's not Swedish Italian, it's just Italian, but I digress. So the way that voices were built back in the Bel Canto era was that you found a teacher. There were some fantastic teachers at the time, and you lived with your teacher if they accepted you as a student. And you spent 5 to 10 years living with your teacher, and your teacher would give you daily voice lessons. He or she would take you through or invite coaches to come and give you, constant diction and language lessons, so you are proficient in specific languages that are beneficial for the singer when it comes to the repertoire. You were also going to the opera house with your teacher and listening to hear and see what the professional voice looks and sounds like. So you really were immersed in opera if you were given the opportunity. Because it was such an immersive experience, teachers oftentimes did not take on many students. So one of the great voice builders of that era, or just before that era, was Vergine, who Vergine was known as Caruso's teacher. I know there's some people out there who think that Caruso just had no teaching and that he was just a natural talent. Actually, if you look at the writing regarding Caruso's voice, people around him at that time, before he worked with Vergine, it was said that he had a beautiful, light, very small voice. Okay, he was singing in, from what I understand, based on the teachers I worked with, he was singing in mix. He was singing in a mixed voice, a mix of falsetto and chest voice. When he worked with Vergine, who was kind of a scumbag, because Vergine actually had made a contract with Caruso in which he stated that if I build your voice, I'm going to take a certain percentage of whatever you earn singing professionally. And he did. However, it was a rolling percentage. It was an increasing percentage year to year. And so if he would have stayed under that contract, Caruso would have ended up owing Vergine almost his entire contract within a certain period of time. He ended up having to hire some legal aid, and he got out of the contract. But point being, these older voice builders were very, very protective of their voice lineage, and they had very high standards when it came to passing the information on to students. So, voices like Gili, like Bonci, Alessandro Bonci, and sorry, ladies, I'm going to be talking about a lot of male voices, just because I think there's not a lot of information regarding the male voice. It cannot be trained like the female voice. This methodology that was passed on to me can be used for the female voice and the male voice, but I am going to be using singers that are kind of partial to the male side, just because that's those are the voices that I like to spend the most time on because I have the most experience working with them. Now, the old world voice building methodologies, it was not necessarily, like a 4-year degree. You went to school and you just came out of school and your voice was built. It was a 10 plus year study. In fact, Lottie Lehman, who Roz Evans worked with Lottie privately, and Lottie had said Lottie was building voices for the university system, and the university said 8 years. Can we build the voice in 8 years? And her sister had kind of fought with the university system and said, you're really pushing it. And I think they were presuming that the singers that were going through the lineage with Lottie would be spending 4 years in undergrad, 2 years in master's, and 2+ years in doctoral work, so they would have a little more time to have their voice completely built. Lottie was then asked, I think a couple years after that, by the head of the school, can you do it in 4 years? And she left the university system and she just and moved on. So the teaching in the schools is really not a good reflection, beneficial reflection of true bel canto training. The singers and the singing methods that are being taught in schools are not bel canto. I've heard and seen so many videos between shorts and long form content of singers professing that they train or they teach an old world voice technique, and then they're using open-throated singing, or they're using vowel modification. These are not bel canto methodologies. These are newer concepts that are actually implemented for a specific reason. It's because of the natural impatience of our modern society. We have a desire to have things now, and we don't like to wait for those things. So if I told you, maybe in the first year of study, we can get your voice to a certain level within the first 1 to 2 years. But you go to somebody else and they say, oh, no, we can do it much faster. We just have to muscle the throat open through the yawn technique or things like that. And we have to manipulate vowels in and above the passaggio. Most people would choose the shorter approach, even though, and this is where the benefit to true bel canto voice building comes in, even though they sacrifice the longevity of their voice by approaching the voice in that way. Okay. It's also, let's just break down why I believe this is a trap to go towards the university open-throated Burton Coffin, Bernard approach to voice. There are, like I say with belters for musical theater, do you know a belter who is singing in the same way they were in their 20s past 35? And there's almost no one. I mean, even like Sutton Foster has started changing the way she's singing. A lot of these singers change the way they're singing because the voice fatigues over time. When you're younger, the voice can recover much faster. However, when you get older, the voice doesn't recover as fast. Bel canto voice building was meant to help the voice grow over the lifetime of the voice, and also to increase in vitality and vibrancy as the voice ages, as opposed to begin to stagnate and begin to suffer from vocal fatigue and things like nodules and polyps in middle age because of the way you're using the voice. So the reason for spending the really 3 to 10 years with a voice builder was so that you would sound like singers like Kozlowski in his 90s when he gave one of his last recitals, or Gigli in his old age, or Tagliavini, who gave a recital, I think he was in his early 80s, and they sounded like they did in their 30s. I mean, listen to the recording, the vibrancy is there, there's no wobble in the voice, they're not manipulating the pharyngeal space. You can hear when they sing with appoggio, which some of these singers talked about appoggio, we'll talk about it later. But you can hear the unique quality in the voice, and you can hear the vibrancy in the voice even up until old age. Because singers, this is the hard truth. You will never come to a point in your life where you'll say, I just am ready to give it up. It's one of the best professions, singing, because as you age, your voice should grow and it should mature. So unlike with dance, where when you're 30 31, 32, maybe 33, 34, 35, you're really considered an older dancer. And you have to consider the reality that you will probably not be dancing in that capacity into your 40s and 50s. However, with voice, the voice is just getting going. The voice is still developing up until 31 for the man, 32, 33. So it's very, very important that singers understand the benefit of true bel canto voice building, which is, if you don't know, true bel canto voice building is a technique, a specific technique that is meant to connect a release of resonance through posture. Okay? When you hold posture in a specific way, and you adjust the posture, you are able to release resonance without actually engaging any of the musculature. No extrinsic or intrinsic musculature should squeeze voluntarily. It should be a natural process through the posture, which we'll talk about later. But true bel canto voice building started with the breath. It started with posture. It started with an understanding that from a very simple tone can come a very grandiose and big tone. But here's one question that I get from a lot of students. They hear my voice now, and I'm considered a leggero tenor, so I'm a lighter tenor, but they still hear body, and they want body in their voice. So they're like, they start manipulating, which is what this whole, breathing in through the yawn shape does. It manipulates the pharyngeal space, and it creates a seemingly bigger sound, but at the expense of the longevity of the voice. Remember this. I promise you that you are going to sacrifice your longevity if you continue to muscle in the pharynx. So now, a lot of students say, but how do you get that bigger sound? How is that quality built into the voice? So here's the simple truth. As the voice ages, the folds, and of course, as you're singing more, your voice is aging and you're singing more, and the folds actually get thicker. And that thickness is what causes a bigger sound over time. Okay, it's the quality of the folds that, as it grows and it matures, it will create a more mature resonance. Now, here's something that I don't think a lot of singers are aware of, because I've had amateur singers. When I was dancing professionally, we would go to karaoke night, and they would say, I sound so much better when I'm drinking. If I have like a beer or I have a glass of wine or I have a couple of shots, I'm so much better when I'm singing. I know my voice is so much louder and bigger. Okay, so the reason is when you drink, you actually increase inflammation in the folds. Okay, the inflammation causes the folds to get puffy, to get bigger, and therefore the increase in size of the folds due to inflammation, not healthy growth. That is the reason for the bigger size in the sound. It's not because you just have taken the magic alcohol and now you have a magically bigger voice. And actually, when you do that, it's very abrasive on the folds, and you end up paying for it days later. Okay, so back to true voice building, between teaching and voice building. Some of the things we're going to talk about in this podcast series down the line. We'll talk about appoggio, the buildup of pressure, the subglottal pressure that is felt physically. These are physical sensations. We're going to talk about how to start lessons properly. We're going to talk about vowels and consonants and how they are or should be used as tools to help build the voice, to remedy fatigue in the voice when you are feeling or hearing fatigue in the voice. Basically, you have this tool set. You can bring singers in and out of posture. You could use the pillar height or the tongue height with some manipulation with the thumb. And you also have the vowels and consonants themselves that can all be used based on what you're hearing to encourage growth in the voice or challenge the voice. So you're either challenging the voice or encouraging growth in the voice, or you're trying to release the voice or release any residual tension in the voice. So, going from a teacher perspective, which is really, giving exercises to students that don't necessarily have a specific functional use. They're just, you learn some exercises that you were, given that were used on your voice, and then you're going to use them on your students' voices, but you really have no idea why you're using them. You don't know why you take the student down in range or up in range first. You don't know why you would descend in the exercise as opposed to rising and then falling. You just kind of giving exercises because you were given the exercises, and when you feel that there's a roadblock in the voice, you just either push through, or you encourage the singer to breathe differently, and you start manipulating and tinkering. Okay, this podcast is meant to shed some light on a lot of the big questions that a lot of teachers have, at least that they've expressed to me, regarding voice technique, posture, release of resonance, and vocal longevity in the long run. Okay, so teaching is not voice building in the sense that there's really no pre-understanding and pre-training of the ear to hear when you should be using certain vowel and consonant combinations. I'll give you an example right now. So say we have a singer who is just starting their voice lesson. Okay, and you are going to start with a vowel and consonant combination. You are so used to doing, something on a 5-note descending. Okay, 5-note descending scale. What would you use for your vowel and consonant combination? It's the first time they're singing for the day, and they haven't warmed up yet. So what would you use? Well, I'll tell you from the voice building perspective, consonants that articulate further away from the folds, like W, W, which is the furthest from the folds, is the least invasive. As vowel and consonants articulate closer and closer to the vocal folds, they become more invasive. And they're invasive in the sense that they encourage, the closer they are in proximity to the vocal folds, they encourage more of a helping with extrinsic muscles of the larynx. And we don't want muscles to get involved. So we want to avoid going right to invasive exercises. We really want to release the voice first, which is number one: release, challenge, then release again. That's whenever we're building a voice or you're working with a singer, especially pre-performance, you are always going to want to follow that regimen of release the voice with an exercise. So descending exercises, as we'll talk about, release the voice more than ascending, which challenge the folds. You want to release the voice, and then you can challenge the voice, and then you always want to release it, because with a challenge will always come residual tension. Even with professional singers, you're going to have residual tension. So going back to our exercise, I would want to have a consonant start the exercise that is going to be more releasing, because the singer has probably been speaking that day. And when we speak, we oftentimes speak, unless we're very well-trained Italians, we sing with some, or speak with some muscular tension, okay? Speech, especially English speech, is going to be a muscled state of the folds. So you want to release that. And you could just do one consonant and vowel combination. Typically, you're going to want to do an open vowel because it's open. But you want to go wah, wah. Okay, just one. However, if you want to really release every single note and give the singer an opportunity to release on every single note, every single part of the fold, you would release on every single note. Wah, 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 and you take them up. Okay, so we'll talk about this more. We'll talk about vowel and consonant combinations that are more or less invasive. We'll talk about direction and how you use direction to influence change in the voice. We will talk about vocal health and how the voice building methodologies can be not only used to build the voice, but also remedy fatigue. Because, one thing besides the understanding of functional voice exercises that differentiates the teacher versus the voice builder is that the voice builders of old were able to remedy vocal health issues. Nodules can be remedied through singing voice therapy, okay, through the Bel Canto method, when you understand what exactly these exercises are doing from a therapeutic standpoint. It can also be used to remedy stuttering, cluttering. It can be used to remedy lisping. It can be used to remedy vocal polyps, which is thought to require surgery. But as Dr. Barbara Mathis found, if you are patient, she found clinically that you can remedy anything using singing voice therapy, using the Bel Canto methodologies. So voice builders were not just able to work with the voice and warm the voice up. They were able to systematically grow the voice and remedy any sort of roadblock blocks along the way. I mean, there's one series that's in our online course that if you participate in our online course for music speech therapy as a singer or voice builder, you should look into taking the music speech therapy courses as well, because it gives you a lot of information that can benefit you with singers who are suffering from fatigue. There was a time that when Dan would always teach me new concepts based on where my voice was at. So one day I came in and I couldn't phonate. I couldn't phonate above an octave. So he could warm me up about 6 or 7 notes, and then my voice would just cut out. And he said, "Okay, this is a good chance for me to share with you the way we build voices that are struggling to phonate before a performance. So let's pretend, I was singing maybe 6 or 7 arias a lesson at that point. He said, we're going to get to your arias, but I'm going to take you through the series that we do for vocal fatigue." And sure enough, it was very invasive. It was very tiring on the voice. But by the time I finished those exercises, I was able to sing through all of my repertoire. The voice felt fresh. And then when I finished, it felt even fresher. And Dan was very specific. Okay, you've learned this. When you work with singers, with this invasive quality, you need to tell them that they have to rest for the vocal rest for the next 2 to 3 days. Of course, I was young. I did not rest. My voice was shot the next day, and I still tried to sing on it, and then I started compensating, and then it ruined me for a whole week. So, point being, when you're learning these methodologies, they are invasive. A lot of the exercises are invasive, meaning they challenge the voice, but if they're used incorrectly, they could cause vocal harm and damage, which is why I want everyone to practice safely. I want you to use these concepts safely on your own voice, because you know what is the hardest part about the voice, especially teaching the voice? It is a sensation-based art. You are replicating sensations that you are feeling. So I, as a teacher, have to have felt those sensations before I can encourage you to feel those same sensations. It drives me bananas when teachers start talking in these, with all this imagery about things that they actually have never felt. They talk about appoggio. If they even talk about appoggio, they talk about passaggio, and they start talking about, placing the voice or holding the voice. There's no placement or holding the voice. Dan used to say, by the time that you start resonating, the sound has already reached the back of the room. You don't have time to think about, getting involved in the voice. All that does is hold you back. All you are thinking about is posture, the breath in, the release of breath, and the shape that you're releasing breath and sound through. Breath and resonance releases through a shape. And that's it. All you can focus on at that point, because it happens so fast and without your active involvement, you can only focus on posture. So I hope this has been a nice, non-chaotic introduction. I tried to not be too chaotic, but I'm super excited to share this information. But this was our first, I'll call it a mini podcast. So our episodes will be around 25 to 30 minutes a piece. I'm looking to, down the line, after I give the basic information and share the basic information, I'm looking to bring on some of my friends in the industry who also worked in this lineage. There's 2 or 3 that did work with Dan for a long period of time, and they understand the methodology, the benefits of the methodology, and they can replicate the technique to a very impressive level. So I'd love to have them on the show. I've talked to them in private, and they're super excited to get involved. So what I would like you to take from this first episode is essentially that there is a difference between voice building and voice coaching and voice teaching. I didn't talk about coaching, but coaching is basically working with just the musicality, the stylistic qualities of the music. So you do not talk. If you are a coach out there, no, you do not get to mess with people's technique, especially if you're not a singer. It drives me crazy when I hear pianists who are coaching, and then they start giving Burton Coffin nonsense techniques or tips. No, coaches are only meant. Roz worked with one of the greatest coaches that's ever lived, Jack Metz, and she understood that she had Lottie, and John C. Wilcox for her voice building, and Jack did not get involved in the voice technique. Maybe he wanted a brighter quality, maybe he wanted a more appoggio, because stylistically, when you're going from Baroque music to classical music, to some of the heavier voice roles, there is more or less appoggio. However, coaches do not get involved with technique. It should be a red flag for anybody who's working with a vocal coach and they start talking about, oh, maybe try this breathing technique that I heard of. Now you should be very, very solid and confident in your technique. But vocal teaching, so vocal coaches, stylistic, periodistic, they're going to talk about rhythm, make sure you're singing the correct note values. They're going to make sure that you're singing the right diction, which is a big thing. Coaches should be very, very good with diction. When you go to teaching, voice teachers, more or less have an understanding of certain exercises that have benefited them in their training, but they don't necessarily always know why they're using those exercises. And many of them are using fallacious techniques like vowel modification, which is not bel canto. It's a legitimate technique. It's going to make you sound bigger and louder, and the open-throated singing will make you sound, like I said, bigger, louder, more mature, faster, but you're going to sacrifice the longevity of your voice. Your voice will not grow over time. You'll be like Horovstovsky, and your voice will just stagnate at a certain point and get smaller and smaller and smaller. So if you really want vocal growth, you're going to want to listen closely to these episodes. We are going into voice building. Voice building is knowing, not, kind of making presumptions about how the voice may or may not grow over time. It's a knowing that comes with understanding these concepts that old world voice builders did understand, but they preserved within their lineage. So when Dan was looking for lineages, and he was looking for true vocal lineages to learn from, he was told from Raz, a true bel canto lineage and voice builder who's going to document the lineage, it has to be within 2 generations of the original bel canto teacher. It cannot be 3, 4, 5, 6 generations, or like displaced by 2 or 3. It has to be very, very closely connected to the original teacher. So if you look on our website, vocalmastery.podia.com, you're going to see I broke down my lineage, how it goes from me. Dan taught me, Raz taught Dan, Lottie and John C. Wilcox taught Raz. And then Dan also worked with Dr. Barbara Mathis, worked with Marilyn Cronin, who documented Modesti's information, worked with Modesti, documented Meloki, or as much as he could of Meloki from Bill Schumann and Eddie VA. So this is voice building. It is a comprehensive understanding of how the voice works and how vowel and consonant combinations can help to grow your voice and your students' voices, so you are a real master of the voice. This information is not out there. And the reason is, as I talked about in the opening, secrecy. Everyone wants to be secret because they all want to be the only one doing it. And I don't care for that at all. If you know my work in an alternative medicine, I've learned some very, very unique and very effective approaches to remedying things in the body. I've learned some very, very unique and effective things with my piano career. And of course, I spent 10 plus years with my vocal information, and I believe in sharing. I believe in creating a community that is actually informed and is going to really create a new generation of beautiful singers that can sing their entire lifetime and have a unique, very unique quality of resonance. Because this technique, what you don't realize is that when you listened to, like, the singers of Adelina Pati's time, if you listen to enough of those singers, you can hear distinct differences in every singer. Even if, you have a bunch of lyric voices, and then you have, maybe a bunch of dramatic voices, every single one of them sounded differently. Okay, they all sounded different because they all have a very unique makeup. Now, when you manipulate things with the pharynx, the back of the throat, when you manipulate the vowel, you are going to sound generic. You're going to sound like you're imitating. And it's just, what I liked about Dan had one of the most beautiful voices, and any singer who's heard him will say the same thing. He had a beautiful tenor voice. Dan could sing at the restaurant. He would be asked to sing some musical theater, and he sounded like he fit right in to classical musical theater. He could sing the operatic work. He could sing the classical work. He could sing the old Italian songs. He could go between different styles and genres. And because he understood his voice to a certain level, he was able to give more or less appoggio, open up the sound more or less, sing more or less pure vowels, which would basically make him more believable in those different styles or in those different genres. So this is a technique for all singers. This is not a technique for, just opera singers. And the reason being, like Dan would say, you always have to bring the voice back to a point of balance. So if you're a musical theater singer and you're spending a lot of your time belting out musical theater repertoire, you're going to need to bring yourself back into balance when you're not on stage. Otherwise, you will not get through performances. Okay, all of us have heard or know of singers who simply blow their voices out yelling at the first 2 or 3 rehearsals, and they get to the first performance and they can't get through it. Or they just make it through it and they're on vocal rest all the time, they're hydrating, and they have all these protocols. This technique is a way to bring yourself back into balance so that you can get through those performances. So for my opera singers, these are tools to encourage vocal growth, vocal purity, and individuality. For my pop and my musical theater singers, this is a way to rebalance the voice, because inevitably you're going to deal with vocal fatigue at some point in your life because of the way you're using your voice. So welcome to Mystery Bel Canto. I'm super excited. I'm your host, Joseph Cianciulli, voice builder for over 10 plus years into the Bel Canto lineages of Ladi Lehman, Manuel Garcia, John C. Wilcox, and I will also say Razem Evans, because she worked with some of the greatest teachers of her time and of the Bel Canto era, which was, of course, before her time, but she worked with a lot of those singers. So when we come back on our next episode, we are going to dive into more of the Bel Canto postural work. So we're going to talk about posture. We're going to talk about posture within the Bel Canto methodology. We're going to talk about breath down the line, because I guarantee it's not what you think it is. Breathing has been manipulated and twisted, and it is really misunderstood. It's actually doing more harm than good. So we'll talk about that down the line. But I really thank each and every one of you for tuning into the podcast. Like I said, down the line, we're going to bring in more guests after we get the information out there, and we will collaborate with more and more of the artistic community to bring you some more information regarding the Bel Canto era of voice builders. So I look forward to seeing you for our next episode. Until then, if you have any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out to us through email, or if you're interested in joining one of our online courses, jump on board. That's the best way to get started. We do have 3 tiers. The middle tier, I think it's essentials or fundamentals, and then the pro track. When you get up to that level, you are going to have one-on-one coaching, which is essential if you're trying to get real feedback. And while this course is just getting off the ground, this is the time to jump in, because my time is limited between the clinic and between my teaching schedule. So this is the time, now that we have, I have open availability for one-on-one consultations and one-on-one teaching. This is the time to really learn the information and to get exposed to it quickly. So we will see you for the next episode. Thank you for tuning in.